Hello, hi, gosh, welcome. I gotta figure out how to do this better. Welcome to another glorious episode of Jeff Has Cool Friends. I am the titular Jeff, and I am here with a very, very cool friend, a very unique friend, a friend that I've actually been dying to do this show with, and I'm so glad I actually got time to be able to spend with him. I am joined by, and I absolutely delight in every ounce of this, puppet slash Muppet, sort of all about a jack of all puppet trades, a James of all puppet trades, James Wojtal Jr. James,
Hi,
dude,
Jeff.
you are so cool.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. You're
I,
very cool too.
oh no,
Enjoy
my
your.
friends are cool. That's the name of the show. James, you are the rare guest on the show that I've never actually met in real life.
Yeah, we've become like parasocial friends because of the internet.
I consider it a mutual admiration society that we are a
Same.
part of.
I agree.
I don't even know, actually, I have no idea the origins of how.
I think I started commenting on some of your stuff on Instagram, and we just started chatting
Just
back and
like,
forth.
was it from my old podcasts or something? I don't know how it
now
happened, but
I think I started. I only just started listening to your old podcast because doing what I do, I
yeah.
consume a lot of audio, and then it ended. But I was also listening to you on what was the name of this show previously? It's now You Don't Even Like This
Oh, so
Show.
unpopular opinion. Okay.
Unpopular opinion. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I guess it would make sense with your job that podcasts would be like a major consumption aspect
Yeah.
of that.
Well, I spent a lot of time alone in my puppet dungeon, as I call it. So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm listening to music sometimes, but normally because there's no other voices around, I need to
Yeah.
hear, you know.
I agree with you on that. Like on long car rides, like I love music, especially
Sure.
on shorter car rides, but anything over an hour, I'm like,
Yeah,
I gotta get
I'm the
some
same.
form of like stimulation. So like, yeah. So I'm guessing then here's how this would have gone. You say that, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? And then I saw what you did, and I was like, oh, I gotta follow this guy. Like,
There you go.
I absolutely
Yeah.
like this is wild. You've actually worked on some amazing projects, stuff
I,
that is actually very important to me as
oh,
well.
I've
And if it
been
was
very lucky.
warmer, I'd be wearing my Fraggle Rock t-shirt that I bought at the Jim Henson exhibit over at the Skirball Center. You have worked in art departments, you have worked as an actor, you've worked as the head puppeteer on one of my friends' television series when you
Which
worked on
series was that?
Pause with Sam J.
Oh yes, I was. I we did a show. That was one episode, but it was very fun. Yeah.
You, Sam J, the amazing stand-up. When I started stand-up in Boston, she was
Oh
sort of on
wow,
her way out of Boston. So like that
that's
was the
amazing.
people that I sort of had come up with and got to
Okay.
experience was like a really strong. But I mean, you've worked Last Week Tonight,
Hmm.
which yeah, I have friends that write for that show,
Yeah.
and Crank Yankers.
I did. I was out. Actually, I was in LA in 2021. I was the on-set puppet builder for the last season of Crank Yankers. So I was middle of COVID, couldn't really do much of anything, masked everywhere.
Yeah.
And I had a little box room on set, and I would build the puppets for that week's productions.
Yeah, I like so I mean, because you've worked obviously as crew and puppet building, but also puppet acting.
Yeah.
And that to me, like, it makes total sense that, like, of course,
Yeah.
you would have, if you're gonna build them, you might as well know how to use them.
Yeah, it doesn't always work that way. A lot of the performers now are not necessarily great builders,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of us who can do all of it, which is helpful.
So I have like infinity questions,
Go for it.
obviously. Like, and obviously, like, I want to get to know you on a more personal level because a lot of
Sure.
it is just you and I reacting to each other's stuff.
That's true.
So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
there have been episodes of this show where I've been very excited not to like learn about the person's stuff, which I also am. Like, I'm interested in that. But there's this side quest in some episodes, which is I have not interacted with this person either ever or in a very long time, and I'm very excited to see how
Sure.
this interaction is going to go. Most famously, I think the Sean McKeon episode, the my former eighth grade student who played for the Dallas Cowboys, and we
That
haven't
was
spoken.
fascinating. That was really interesting.
Honestly, like I got a lot of like sports ball people that totally skipped the episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like genuinely, I'm like, I believe it's one of my best episodes because
That,
of me feeling out those interactions.
sure. I mean, well, especially for you to take that journey down that former career path and see where
Yeah.
one of your students has ended up. That was, and I'm not a sports guy, but I thought that was really exciting. It was,
Yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, I don't think you trust me if you think that my interview is going to be about sports and more
yeah,
not about like the life of a person who has dedicated themselves to doing this
yeah,
terrifying thing. But anyway, that's not about him. It's about
that's
you.
all good.
I do have a lot of questions
Go
because
for
like
it. Yeah.
my first question is how many times in your life have you been sent the Seth MacFarlane SNL clip with uh
Many times.
roughly how many times?
Oh,
Because
like all the time, because it's you get sent a lot of that when you're in a very niche career.
yeah.
It's either that or another bit from another show, another sketch with a puppet or something. But I have a connection to that because I used to work for the guy who built those puppets. Those
And
those
you've worked
puppets
on
were
SNL.
I have worked on SNL and for different companies in
Yes.
varying ways. When I left the Henson Company in 2002, I started freelancing for a guy named Bob Flanagan, who unfortunately just passed away a couple months ago. But he was a genius. He was a mad genius. If you talk to any of the old time crew on SNL, they all remember him. He built Toonces, the driving cat. He was like that level. He was there in the 80s all through. And he used to have this shocking red hair. And he
Like
built,
Beaker.
yeah, like Beaker, very much. And he worked for Henson for years. He worked on Sesame and Fraggle Rock and the Jim Henson Hour. And he did some puppeteering with Jim on meeting films. And then he went off and started his own thing and worked in theater and SNL, Letterman, and Late Night with Conan O'Brien. He did everybody.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. And I thought about it because like for me, a couple of things people throw at me. People love sending me stuff about Jose Canseco because we of the Jose Canseco cast. But
Yes.
also like there's a sketch called Jeff Purdy, which is just Alex Trebek and three people named Jeff, and all the answers are Jeff. And like I get sent that probably like once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Sure.
Somebody's like, you got to see this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how could you imagine that I have not at this point in time? But
I,
so I wonder
and it's
about that.
fun. I mean,
That,
but it's nice that they're thinking of you in a way because that's what
oh,
sparks their
yes.
mind. It's like,
Yes.
oh, James will love this. He's probably never seen it before. I probably have, but we also even in the world of puppet stuff, like me and my friends will find the most absurd and awful things and send them to each other. There's a lot of really terrifying ventriloquist stuff happening out there, particularly in the highly religious world, and they can be
Oh, shit.
incredibly creepy.
I remember I have somewhere and I'll find it. There's photos of me with a Jesus puppet that
Mm-hmm.
I had found in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. That it's just like me and the puppet like having an
Of
argument.
course.
And then
Awesome.
um
There's so much of it out there. I mean, and growing up when I did, it's like, I don't know if you had that commercial up in Boston, but you remember the pills that doing the This Is Serious that turned into the rap song eventually?
maybe I don't
I think
know.
anyways, a bunch of pills sitting outside of a bottle and they start singing, "This is serious. We could make you delirious. You should have a healthy fear of us. Too much of us is dangerous."
I haven't seen that. So it could be
Oh,
regional or
it might be regional. It was New York regional, I think.
okay, because it also could be like half generational.
Mm,
Like, like because PSAs are like very limited in their like
sure.
because like it's the stuff that's being shown on like commercials or excuse
Uh-huh.
me, cartoons. And so
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the cartoons you may have grown up on were like slightly removed from the ones I did because I
Yeah.
think we're separated by like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I've noticed that when I talk to people that are 5 or 6 years younger than me, and I'll bring up a PSA and they're like, I don't like
Yeah.
from where I'm from too. And I'm like, do you remember this one? Like, remember the tell one lie leads to another? And they're like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
sorry.
And that will happen. Like, I grew up with like aside from the Muppets, like the Magic Garden which
Secret
was
Garden.
no, the Magic Garden
Oh, the
was a
Magic Garden.
different thing. Yeah, it was the Secret Garden is that wonderful
That
book play.
that book
Or,
that they always like make into a new movie
yeah,
every like 6 years.
exactly. And then I think it was the Magic Garden was these two women who are both in their 80s now, but they're still around, who like had like the Chuckle Patch, which were a bunch of like daisy flowers that would
Oh,
laugh,
okay,
and
yeah.
Sherlock the squirrel and a bird, and it was very
Was
regional,
it
done at the W.
Squirrellock or was it Sherlock the
I'm
Squirrel?
pretty sure it was Sherlock. He was like a pink squirrel.
Dip move to not call him Squirrellock.
Yeah, it was the 70s or the 60s, I guess, when they started it, but
Yeah, is that
ran
like
for forever on PIX.
were you a Sid and Marty Krofft consumer when you were a
Oh
child?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they were reruns when I was getting to
Mhm.
them, but I remember coming home from kindergarten and first grade, and what's the one that again
HR
falling
Puffin
out of my head?
stuff or the sea
HR
monster?
Puff and stuff. Sigmund the Sea Monster more than HR, but also the Banana Splits. They would
Oh.
be running that on Channel 11. So I grew up with always catching the end of that.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the main question.
Go for it.
Why do you do this? Like what not
Uh,
why do you do this as in like, 'cause I need to make a living and this is what I do,
no,
but like this is such a unique because like
yeah,
my friend's dad is David Barkley,
okay.
who's like, you know,
Mhm.
Agra and a third
Worked
of
on. He worked for
Java and
Henson
like
for years.
yes.
Yeah.
So and he like his story is like he was like working in the small puppet shop and like I think Mark Hamill found him and brought him along and so
Mm,
that's how he got absorbed into this world,
that's
which is
awesome.
like a unique story, right? Like,
Yes,
you know, how do you get into something like this? Because it's so
um,
unique and it's such a
it is.
weirdly pocketed space of art
Yeah.
and art in all fronts, fabrication, it's also acting, it's so like how do you get in
Yeah. I don't. It's. I think it's part of growing up at the right time.
Mhm.
Like I grew up like at the height, the peak of the Muppet popularity.
Yeah,
Sesame Street had been on for, I guess, about 9 years when I was born,
okay.
8 years. Muppet Show started when I was 1 years old in 1976.
Oh, wow.
And then Fraggle Rock started when I was in elementary school. So that's 82, 83, something like that. Ran until 87. And Dark Crystal in the mix and Star Wars and all that. So I grew up in that kind of weird sweet spot of all of that. But I also didn't grow up with having like Disney cartoons pushed down my throat or anything. It was Muppet, very Muppet
Yeah, you
heavy.
you you grew up in the dark times of Disney.
Yeah, there wasn't
Or
much.
no,
I
I mean,
mean,
it was failing. I mean,
yeah,
Disney was hemorrhaging money.
you knew those characters through osmosis, not
Yeah,
because they were in your eyes. I never saw a Mickey Mouse cartoon or a Donald Duck cartoon until I was a teenager.
except for, like, the Christmas Carol. That's
Which,
the
yeah, I
one, like,
think
for some reason, that's the Mickey thing
everyone
that
has that
everybody saw.
because I think it was a theatrical release, and I think I saw it in a movie theater.
It was also on for free every year.
Was it?
Yeah, it's a
Very
Christmas
possibly.
special, so it was like,
Yeah,
Wonderful World of Disney, some Sunday night before Christmas would show that one,
very
But
possibly. Yeah.
it is definitely because yeah, I remember, like, The Black Cauldron was, like, a big investment for Disney's animation, and it was, like, a
Yeah.
massive flop.
And it's still one I haven't seen. I think because of that, I think it has that stigma of it's not worth watching.
I mean,
You
wasn't that,
know,
like, Ralph Bakshi worked on that one? And, like
maybe
and
I
I mean, for
I've
my
seen images that look amazing, but I've never watched the whole movie.
I read those books a lot when I was a kid.
Okay.
The Book of 3
Hmm.
and Black Cauldron and all the way up to
I
that.
know a friend of mine's a big fan of them. I've
I
not read them though.
love them. They were kinda like Lord of the Rings for people that had ADHD.
Okay.
It's just like, it's Lord of the Rings, but you can finish this book actually.
Yes.
Like,
We're
it's
going to
not
jump
so long.
around and it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting. We'll keep your attention.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that, at least that being osmosis. And then the making aspect of it, my mom is very talented and I'm the oldest of five. And it's like, well, we got to keep you kids busy. And it's like, and I like to draw and I like to do all that. And she taught me how to sew when I was 4. So I
Really?
used to make just like little pillowy stuffed animals out of felt. And
So
I just
you were
kept doing it.
this was like your destiny.
I
Like,
guess so.
it's sort of
Yeah.
like an accidental destiny. Like, a lot
Yeah.
of people, they're like, "Well, I wanted to be a Muppeteer, so I went to school to learn how to do it." And you're saying
Yeah.
you were taught how to do this before that was a job you knew existed. You didn't even know
Yeah, to a
jobs were
point.
a thing.
I didn't even know what a job was. No,
Yeah.
it was a fun thing I did. It was my hobby, and I would draw a little shape, and I would cut it out, and I would put it together, and did that for years, and watching the Muppets and going, "How do they do that? How is that made?" There's no internet. There aren't that many books showing you how to do it, so it was all watching stuff on VHS and figuring it out and figuring it like I think the big dawn thing for me was looking at a couch that we had that was torn and you could see the cushion underneath and then looking at Gonzo's nose and looking at that cushion and go, oh, it's foam rubber. That's what that
Oh,
is. That was my big eureka moment. Like, aha.
okay. Yeah. What a I don't know how to say it because I don't want to overly dramatize an experience, but like it really does have like movie scene energy of like you see the kid sewing because he needs to, be kept
Mhm.
busy, and then like the aha moment of there,
Yeah.
and like that it seems like cinematic destiny that
It's
that's
like
what
that. It's like
happened.
the scene in Close Encounters when he's making the mountain out of
Mashed
mashed
potatoes.
potatoes.
I was not expecting an answer like that. I was generally
Okay.
expecting a like kind of like a well, I always like the Muppets, so I wanted to do it, but I learned you have to make it if you want to be able,
Hmm.
so I was really expecting this. So I went to college and I went, and
Yeah, yeah.
instead I get a very fascinating thing, and that's awesome. Like that's
Well,
so
thank you.
cool. Like
Yes, I mean, my very first things were just little whatever I could make around the house, using scraps, And my mom was inspiring too, because she would make our Halloween costumes. So like
wow.
she would go and get
With
the
five kids, you'd have to.
McCall's. Yeah, she'd get
Or
the
else you'd be
McCall's patterns and the
yeah.
butter patterns. And I would always challenge her to make something more complicated. So it's like, you know, I want this crazy crocodile costume, but it needs a lower jaw because they didn't design it on the package.
Yeah.
So
Was that your favorite? Like what were some of the examples? Do you remember?
oh, oh, they were always weird. Like I remember I went as a boxing kangaroo when I was like
Hell,
four,
hell yeah.
five, something like that, like 5 or 6. I had a bathrobe, a blue bathrobe.
Mhm.
She made the furry suit. We found some boxing gloves somewhere, and I think I had like gym trunks on and a tail sewn to them. So they
That's
worked great.
awesome.
Yeah,
I remember boxing robes. I always found them to be like weirdly embarrassing at my level. And one of the guys who was on my team, because my college team, we all got signed up for the Golden Gloves by our coach. And some of us did very well, some of us didn't. And like for it was right after Christmas. And
Mhm.
like I guess like his Christmas gift was like this green Irish themed. And he went in,
Sure.
he got unfathomably beaten.
Oh,
And I was
oh.
just like, "Shouldn't have gotten that as your gift, man. That's like a $200 that's like a
Oh, it's
$200
such a nice,
embarrassment."
easy shorthand visually, though. You think of a boxer in that. Oddly enough, I was watching a rerun of Taxi not long ago,
Right.
and it was the one where Tony they were giving him a robe in the gym for a big match or something. I think something
He
similar happened.
he was a phenomenal boxer, by the way.
Was he really?
Tony Danza.
Yeah.
Like, there's video of him sending a dude through the ropes with a
Oh
sh
wow.
Tony Danza was very, very good.
I knew
Weirdly,
he I knew he boxed, but I didn't know how good he was then. Yeah.
I incidentally know his brother,
Oh wow.
and who makes a great tomato sauce, by the way. And he was like talking about his, Tony's
Hmm.
boxing career because he found out I used to be a boxer,
Sure.
and he was like, check out this video. Like he was like really, really good. And I was like, Tony Danza? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of how he was discovered.
That's amazing. Seems like
And
a nice guy. He stopped by our picket line when we did the SAG after
oh
Puppeteer
yeah.
picket in New York. He came and walked with us for like 20 minutes.
Hey, you mind if I walk with you?
Yeah, yeah, he did.
Oh
Literally
yeah,
grabbed
Tony
the
Danza.
sign, walked with us all. It was really fun.
Yeah, you should have gotten a puppet Tony Danza.
Well, yeah, it was there's a whole I had built a puppet for it for the New York one, and so did my friend Noel. And I didn't know they had rules about wooden poles. You can't have a wooden, I make sense, but I didn't think of that.
It's a technicality though.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
like going
But
60
I
and
had built a whole
55.
rig so the mouth would open, and it was the whole thing.
Yeah. Called Who's the Cloth? We could have called it.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Who's the cloth?
Like that origin story is so much more interesting than I was expecting it to be 100% honest. And like I'm really glad that I got that
Okay,
information. And like the funny part is I have a million questions rattling around, and a lot of them are like quick hit questions,
sure.
which I'm pining to ask, but I actually want to save them for the Patreon exclusive content.
Okay.
So I'm like sitting here like seething with like anticipation to ask
Well,
these
we're gonna get to
questions.
those, but you can ask some other.
We
Give
will.
me
We
give me
will.
another long form.
So, how do you get your first job?
Okay, so I'm doing all of that all through elementary school, all through middle school, making stuff on my own, figuring things out. I do it in high school. When I get to high school, I don't have an art class. It doesn't fit into my schedule course load the way I because of the classes I was in. And but I had a free period, which was like, I don't need a free period. I haven't had an art class since 5th grade because I was in the band in middle school, so I didn't
Wow.
get art.
But you were
So
still
I went,
working on stuff. What'd you
yeah,
play?
still doing stuff. I played trombone badly.
Man.
But it was just something to do. I'm like, figured why not. I went to the art teacher, Mrs. Austin, and I said, "Look, this is what I do." I showed her some things I made in my drawings. It's like, but I can't have an art class in my schedule because for whatever reason you don't have a freshman art class this period. But I have a free period. Can I just sit in the art room during your AP class? And she's like, "Yeah, of course." So
Like surveying the class.
yeah, she just let me come in and do I didn't have to do the course load. I just got to work on my stuff. So I made like big foam dinosaur puppet and worked on carving and patterning and learned how to use the airbrush and did gluing and all sorts of stuff. And it was great.
What, like, were the older kids, how did they feel about that? Was that like a thing
Um,
you can even remember that they had opinions about, or
I think some of them thought what I was doing was pretty cool. But I mean, a lot of, it's an art class and it's not like, this isn't like an arts high school. This is just regular,
but you said it
normal
was
high school.
advanced, right?
It was the AP art class. So it
Which,
was
what
like,
the is that? An
I don't
APR
know.
class? I've never
It's
even
so
heard of
weird.
that.
I don't understand why they have it like that, but it was like they were talented kids, but they weren't necessarily going into the arts.
Okay.
But so they did that, and it's also like we also had we had a graphic arts class, which was really cool, and I was in that, and that's all pre-computers. It's all learning how to cut stuff out of new film and
Yeah,
do
stenciling
screen
and
printing.
yeah,
Yeah,
printing and stuff. Wow.
and photography, learning how to develop film, all that. But so they, for the most part, they just kind of thought what I was doing was cool. But I was sitting at like on my own at a different table and not interrupting the class.
Yeah, because I like that. You become of two minds when you think about that, which is either that's the weird kid or that's the prodigy
Well,
or
it
or a
definitely was the
mix.
weird kid.
Huh?
I definitely was the weird kid.
Well, sure, but I mean, there's also like the weird kid that's cool. Like
Yeah,
like
yeah,
some weird kids are like the kids that sulk and look scary and they get bullied. And then there's the weird
sure.
kid where it's just like, yeah, this kid just made a dinosaur in art class,
Yeah.
like a foam dinosaur. Like that's cool as
And I don't really know much about what they thought about it, honestly, because they were older and I was a freshman. So it was like, I didn't really talk to them all that much. So I kind of sat by myself, but I don't know that I wasn't getting picked on in that class for doing what I did. So that was good.
this really does have like a very like you have a fascinating origin story.
Well, thank you.
Like it seems like it's I hate to use the phrase, but
Mhm.
like it seems like this career is like a destiny.
Well, hopefully, so far it's going okay.
I mean, well, you're also still
Yeah.
young. Like I know you were like, "Oh, I'm
Ish.
getting old," but like
Yeah.
I don't know if I've every puppeteer I've seen, they all have long gray hair and Ben and
Yeah.
Jerry's tie dye all over themselves or whatever.
There definitely is a lot of that look in our world.
I guess like the question that I would normally save for the end of
Hmm.
this episode that I want to ask now because I think
Sure.
it fits very well is like because we talked ahead of time about like you being like an independent contractor and
Hmm.
like having all this time where like you have all these credits and you're working really hard, but it's
Yeah.
like the financial aspect of anything in the arts, as I can attest to
Sure.
from watching my Patreon numbers plunged in the middle of
Oh,
a pandemic I think is like is the goal to someday like open your own studio or to
yeah.
like build up the name as such that you or build up the Rolodex, if you will,
Yeah.
enough
I,
to be able
I don't know. I mean, I had to do the LLC thing a couple years ago for a contract just because it was a bigger number than I'd ever dealt with and for legal reasons. And I am not good on that side of things. Like I don't have a brain for business, or for
that's why
figures.
you get assistants.
Yes, yeah. But then I wouldn't have enough money to pay them. So
Well, yeah, but then
yeah,
again, but like if you are in the process of building something,
sure.
like like I'm going to assume that like Jim Henson, he was adamant about getting his art out there, but like how was he at running a business at first? Like
I think was actually very good at
yeah, he
it.
was actually pretty good. I
Yeah,
remember reading
he
about
knew
him.
what he was doing early on, I think.
I tried
And
using an example that kind of blew up
yeah,
in my
yeah,
face.
you got to find that weird puppeteer that ends up working at like Kmart for the rest of his
I,
life.
I know a lot of brilliant, like famous creators
Sure.
that would leave the house without their car keys every day if they didn't have an assistant there
Yeah.
to keep their together. And it's
Yeah.
like one of those things where it's like they wouldn't have the millions of dollars in revenue if they didn't have that one assistant there
Yeah.
making it all work. And that's fascinating to me
It is.
how valuable it is. And it actually reminded me, there's a movie on Netflix out now with God, what's his name? He was in the Iron Claw. It's a movie with Zac Efron.
Okay.
And it's basically like he falls in love with his assistant's mother, who's Nicole Kidman.
Oh,
Um,
this just came out, right? Uh,
yes,
Recently?
it's the worst thing I've seen in a very long time.
Well, I'll never watch it, but I remember hearing it bandied about in different stories somewhere.
I like him. I like
Yeah.
Zac Efron. I like Nicole Kidman.
Hmm.
Like it's like whoever did the lighting should be in The Hague. Like they all look so terrible. It's almost you're sitting there and you're like, oh, because of the surgeries, but you guys can,
Yeah.
but it's like all about, and he's like, does this whole thing where he talks about how like, he has nothing without the assistant because the assistant
Sure.
is the one that, you know, he's a leaf on
Keeps
the
him on
wind
track.
and that
Yeah.
keeps it on track.
I
So
mean, it
yeah,
probably is something I'd have to look into at the moment. Right now it's weird because what I do now, like with the Bronx Zoo, they're like my big contract right now, which I
you
love.
work with the
And
Bronx
it's like
Zoo,
I was there all the time as a kid, and actually I started doing stuff there with Noel McNeil, who was Bear from Bear in the Big Blue House.
which you also
So
worked on, right? You
I
worked
did.
on
I took I built Bear's head from season 2 on.
Did
So
now when you build somebody's head like
mhm,
a puppet or Muppet,
mhm,
when you're building their head off of an already existing design, is it
mhm.
I fabricated the thing to make sure it stays the same, or we
Yes.
improved upon it and found ways to make certain things better while still
Um,
making it look the same, or we changed the
it, it
slightly
it can
changed?
it can be both. It
Okay,
can be both. With Bear for the show, my task was to replicate what had been built originally by Kip Rathke off of Paul Andreyko's design, who was the designer for that show. So they brought the head in and they brought the repro box out, and you take out the patterns and you look at it and go, okay, where do I start and get to fabricating? He had a little tricky mechanism, and there were two different versions. For TV, he would slide his index finger back and forth to make the brows go up and down.
okay,
And then we started doing them for PR and for Disneyland and Disney World and for the European market. So we had these simpler bears that we would make, and they had a lever that was activated up and just pushing down and up to make the brows do the same move. But Noel liked the slider, so we had to replicate that for him.
that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Um, do you find and obviously nothing against any properties because
Mhm.
properties are great and they pay the
Sure.
bills and blah, blah, blah. Do
Yeah.
you find it creatively stifling to have to reproduce somebody else's work? Do you prefer to create your own stuff or do you like working
Yeah.
on IP that might be something because you've worked in the Muppet world as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you like if you were sculpting Kermit,
Mhm. Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
but it's also a design that's existed for 60 years.
Yeah. And that was something I wasn't ready for when I started doing the work. I thought I'd go in and we just start building crazy puppets just for the heck of it. We're going to make a
Yeah.
thing and it's going to, and then you get the reality of no, we're making a show. This is the job. You make this character for this show. And with Bear, I ended up building 19 heads, two for television, and then 16 or 17 of them for PR purposes and live stage
Yeah.
shows. So, and I got it down to the point where I could build a bear head in about a week. I mean, I could do
It's my
everything,
favorite store in the mall.
build a
Build a
bear.
Bear Head Workshop.
Perfect. So we did that. And when I was doing that with Bear, I would build stuff for fun in the afternoons in the shop. So
Okay.
I would go and find some fur in the bins and go, this is cool. We're not using it. Make it. So I made a lot of monsters. And so I made it actually, one of them ended up becoming kind of a character named Mo. And he
Really?
was a frackle, which was not a Fraggle. The Frackles are the Muppet monsters, which is technically where Gonzo comes from. And they're all the beaky, snouted, sharp toothed characters that would be on the
Yeah.
Muppet Show.
The
Yeah.
guys
Yeah,
and like the
all
guy
those guys.
they always had really Brooklyn energy.
Very much so.
Those guys.
I always thought the company had very New York energy, very East Coast energy. A lot of the characters, but yeah. So I made a couple of those just because it was fun. And Mo ended up getting sent out to California, and they used him on the Family Feud when the Muppets guested in the
That's
'90s.
why the Family Feud was on. Was he at like one of the Family Feud
It was one of the contestants. It was
on a
like they had
Muppets?
Muppets
So
on the
of
Family
all of
Feud.
the Muppet options they have now, was that because of limited
I
puppeteers for
think it was
voices?
limited
Like
availability of
you
performers who
can't have
did
Sam
certain
Eagle and
voices.
Miss Piggy, right? Because that's the same
All
dude.
of that.
Yeah.
That and like, at the time Frank wasn't necessarily doing a lot of performing,
Yeah.
so I don't know that Piggy was on that episode. He hadn't handed the character off to anyone else yet. So like I think Pepe was on it, Kermit was on it. I think they had someone was there doing Sweetums, I think, at one point. But this character Mo, who's just a Muppet monster, ended up being in the middle.
That must have been awesome to see.
Oh, it was great for me. I'm like, wow, a thing I made, it's on TV. And it was very cool for me.
Do you get a bonus for that, or is that something like the
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I was wondering if that's like the Disney rule where it's like if you work for us and you make something, it's our property.
Yeah, it's very much that.
Yeah.
But last a couple of years ago, there's a website called Tough Pigs did a retrospective because Mo ended up being in Kirk Thatcher's film Muppet.
Kirk
Yeah, Muppets.
Thatcher, friend of the show.
There you
We
go.
love
He's
Kirk.
awesome. I
We love
love him.
Kirk very much.
I got to watch him direct the Muppets for the old Odyssey channel. They did these interstitials, and it was such a great, fun day on set. It was like watching him work, and they all had a good time.
Weirdly enough, for those of you that aren't familiar, Kirk Thatcher is a Muppets legend, and he also happens to be, because he is good friends with Michael Giacchino, he's one of the bounty hunters in Werewolf by Night, and he's also
Yep.
famously the San Francisco punk in
Yes.
Star Trek.
And in Spider-Man Homecoming.
That's right. And he's in Picard as well, I believe.
I think he's in Picard, and he also recently is a voice in that Inside Out 2. He's all over the place.
Yeah.
And he was a voice in Gremlins and a puppeteer on that.
He's one of the guys that I keep meaning to ask to do the show, but I'm always just like, man, he's so
I should do it. He's got so many stories of doing so many things.
Well, because I met him, I think the same day I met him, because it was at a party at Jennifer Muro's house, and Jennifer Muro, she's the glue, the social glue of a big nerd community out here, where it was like him and then David Silverman from The Simpsons, who I just had on the show, and like Michael Giacchino and all these really amazing people. And when like Kirk and I were talking for a long time until I finally like sussed out what he did and figured it out. He was just like a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah. He designed a lot of characters for the Jim Henson Hour. And I believe he designed Waldo C. Graphic, which was the first computer generated Muppet.
Classic.
So, yep.
Classic Waldo.
Well, I could delve deep into Muppet nerddom.
But I mean, I'm in. Like, I got to interview a Muppet.
Oh, yeah.
Exciting. I got to interview Constantine, the world's most dangerous frog.
Which now he is actually Kermit. That is Matt Vogel who performed that character.
He was a very nice guy. I got to obviously meet him as well.
Sure.
That trick where they like wake the Muppet up during an interview, like the Muppet's asleep when you meet them. Oh, hello. That worked on me.
And the magic of it too, because you're an adult, you know what's happening, but you focus on that character. It's just the magic of it being here and coming to life.
There were parts of me like I'd look up at him and be like, "Can you believe him? Like, can you believe I'm talking to this Muppet?"
Yeah.
Like, he's like, "Yeah."
Well,
man.
I mean, the first day I walked onto the set of Sesame Street when I was 15, as a visitor, I was just astounded. It was amazing.
I could see that. Now, when they're filming Sesame Street, I don't know if you knew that. Like, do you know, like, because obviously you worked on it and stuff. Like, do the kids see the puppeteers?
Yes,
they do. Okay,
they're
so
right
they know. So that's the violation of childlike wonder when you're a child actor.
Yeah, but they don't lose it. I mean, you've seen those images, like the classic ones from the 70s. The kids are just enamored with the Kermit. They're not looking at the hairy man below him, you know. And for me, I mean, I knew what that stuff was, and it was kind of circuitous a way of getting to visit the set when I was a kid. But walking in, it was just magical to me, just to see them performing. Seeing the green room, seeing the set, and this was in one of the older studios on the west side of Manhattan on 57th Street, because now they shoot at Kaufman in Astoria. And it's like I got to meet Kevin Clash at the time was the big performer doing Elmo.
Splinter.
Splinter, which was that had just happened that summer before.
Yeah, 1990, right?
Yeah, and who else? I got to David Rudman was there. Who else? Oh, and then I got to meet Richard Hunt, which is about a year and a half before he passed away. And
Wow,
he's one of the classic Muppet
that's
performers,
so
Scooter the
cool.
Gopher and Gladys the Cow and Forgetful Jones and
Forgetful Jones was my ex-wife's nickname for me.
jeez. Term of endearment slash
Rightfully
passive
earned.
aggressive.
It was
Oh,
it was
rightfully.
it was slightly, it was endearing, but it was
Yeah.
about a huge problem that I have. So
Okay.
it's like,
Well, there you go. I
yeah,
think I have the same problem. I forget things constantly. So
yeah, I'm just like, why did I come into this room? And she's like,
yeah,
Forgetful Jones is at it again.
there you go.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. So I mean, that it was amazing for me. You get to see them. They're on the rolly carts, so the characters can be the right height, and the actors are all up in the air, and
That is bad.
you know.
Yeah, I remember when I had Morgana Ignis on the show, and she was talking about, because she worked on what's the one with the alien hosts a talk show
Oh,
on
oh, oh, the one that was just on Disney, right?
yeah, because she was
Yeah.
the body of the alien.
She was the body.
And
Oh God, I forget. I know the show. I didn't watch it, but I know what it is.
the
And the guy who
description
did
of the,
Freakazoid's voice was the character on the
yeah,
show.
and the description of the process fascinated me.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
it's like a ballet underneath on making all that stuff happen.
quite, yeah,
Yeah.
like really fascinating and really, really rad. It kind of blows me away. Speaking of things that blow me away, I don't know if you know
Yes.
this, James. You do know this because I know you listen to the show. I have producers.
Oh
There are
yes.
people, if you head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May and you sign up for any of the producer tiers, I will say your name on this episode if you've already done it, or any and all future episodes if you do it in the future. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May. I do lots of other stuff, including I give away cards, trading cards that I open. And that's fun. That's a fun gig doing
That
that.
is a fun. It's a great thing you started there.
It's so fun. I've accidentally gotten a lot of people addicted to it, which is a problem, but that's okay.
That's hey, you need the views.
I do feel
Get
that.
those eyes on the channel.
I do, yeah. I've had people create their own channels, doing their own breaks, and I'm just like,
Uh-oh.
I'm so sorry, guys. But we're gonna give a big shout out. So I'm gonna give a big shout out to Aldo Vargas is adding Jeff Has Cool Friends producer to his resume. That is true, and you can put my email address on the resume, and I will give you a glowing recommendation. That's the kind of business that the patreon.com/Jeff May world is entering into.
Why
Mild
not?
fraud.
That you are technically a producer.
That is true. You are a producer. Shout out to that scene in Lost City where Brad Pitt dies. Shout out to the ghost. It's always great. Shout out to the ghost of Dave Thomas. Shout out to, I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. You ever do a Star Wars puppet?
Not officially. For College Humor, I made some crappy Ewok costumes for little kids to do backup dancing in.
Oh, nice. Were they purposefully crappy?
They were. You called me a day and a half before you needed them, and you didn't have measurements.
There it is. Because I don't know if you were like the kids made them themselves, and you'd have to like purposefully make them.
No, no, it was Ewoks. Made some poor little girl cry because she couldn't see out of the mask properly. And we were like, don't worry about it. You look great. It doesn't matter if you can see or not.
He's like, I don't care. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
I'm a child. Shout out to mashed potatoes or the brioche buns of side dishes. I just got back from vacation. I had lots of opportunities to eat mashed potatoes, and I passed.
I know you're not a mashed potato guy.
I will tell you this. I had one of the best sweet potatoes I've ever had in my life.
Well, that's awesome.
At a place called Ukiah in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a sushi restaurant or a Japanese steakhouse that has sushi in Asheville, North Carolina. It was some of the best food I've ever had.
Fantastic.
Not what you'd think of in North Carolina. You wouldn't think like Japanese steakhouse. That's going to be the best food.
Hey, there's surprises everywhere.
Somebody sent me a photo of brioche buns. Oh, it's Dre, my co-host on Nerd, that his mother had gotten brioche buns for the burgers. I was just like, how could
I don't mind a brioche bun, but I cannot see them being too sweet. I get that.
They're also like so greasy.
Yeah, a little bit of that. I like an English muffin, honestly.
Burger on an English muffin is a very, very underappreciated scenario. And I'm with you 100%.
There you go.
Also, a grilled English muffin.
Yes.
A grilled English muffin is an underappreciated existence. People don't know about them.
No, they don't do
like
that.
A secret hack. And then you're like, check this out. I'm going to put the butter on beforehand, crisp the shit out of this English muffin. Granted, you don't get all the nooks and crannies, but that doesn't matter because the flavor is out of this world.
That's how we did it at the deli when I was a kid.
I
Not with
wonder
the
if that's
English
an East
muffin, but
Coast thing, right?
could be.
Because I
They
used
had
to get
the
that at
they had
like
the little
Cap.
butter thing on the grill, and you'd take the bun on it and
Oh
slap
yeah,
them on the grill.
so good. That's what
Mhm.
I want. Shout
Yeah.
out to the Enchanted Wandering Unpierced Left Nipple Cider served at room temperature. Shout out to Call Me Sean or whatever. Shout out to the Oatmeal Savage. You an oatmeal guy or are you that's the most disgusting
I
thing?
enjoy oatmeal to
Do
a
you?
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Not my favorite, but it's healthy
You know what I
ish.
like? I like oatmeal with a raisin in it.
Not a raisin guy.
I'm a raisin guy.
So there's nothing wrong with that. They just don't
I've
do it for
come
me.
around. I think raisins have bad PR.
I think it's just that having one too many bad ones in a cookie.
That's different. It's
Yeah.
no, it's not having one too many bad ones in a cookie. It's having one too many in a cookie because raisins don't belong in a cookie.
Well, no, but you
That-
get that one that got overcooked and just didn't taste right
The
when you
answer
bit
is
into it.
don't never eat a cookie with a raisin in it.
Well, I
Raisins
agree.
are fool's chocolate chips, right? Like you
That's right.
think you have something and then you eat it and you're
They're
like, it's disgusting.
they're a filthy, filthy lie.
But a specific like like I got a raisin guy.
Yeah.
And my
I can eat
farmer.
a raisin on its own.
I like a raisin. I like a raisin in a salad with a vinegary dressing.
All right. There you go.
A nice,
Yeah.
like kind of like a tart,
Balancing this
salty dressing.
Yeah.
Throw the salt in, but like
sweet and salt, that balances.
yeah, but also just oatmeal with a raisin in it is good.
All right.
I really do like it.
Yeah.
I support it.
Well, thank you. Awesome.
Shout out to you, Oatmeal Savage, for making me think about oatmeal. Granted, I can't eat it for 8 months because it's so hot that I will die if I put
Oh,
that
there
in.
you go.
But-
Yeah. I'm big on granola and yogurt right now.
Oh, it's good stuff. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
good.
the 90s are coming for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty soon you're going to find out that all of those things are bad for you. Remember that? We thought it was health food, and then they're just like, well, the granola's baked in
I
sugar.
can't
and
worry
also,
about it anymore.
Yeah,
It's all
right.
going to kill me eventually.
I mean, maybe the microplastics will fight it off. Shout out to watch me use these prehensile nipples to pick up pennies off the floor. Shout out to check out this month's Nerd with Dre and Jeff, in which Dre and I talk about Masters of the Universe 2000X reboot with the current architect of the modern Masters of the Universe statue line at Tweeterhead, David Igo.
That was a good
So,
episode.
that episode was so fun to do.
Yeah.
Like
It's interesting. I mean, I wasn't into them as a kid when they came out, but I enjoy seeing the evolution of this line of characters. And I enjoyed the Netflix show.
Oh, I loved the Netflix show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that really comes down to like I love pop culture history, so doing
Sure.
doing just nerd in general really fun, but
Yeah.
doing this one was really interesting because I'm with you on like the evolution of this and like things growing and things that absolutely should not maintain financial input, like
Mhm.
that should not maintain financial success, still find it because our generation can't buy a house. So instead we're just like, all right, well, I don't have $400,000, but I do have $40.
Yes.
And
Let me buy this really articulated T-Rex that's sitting over here.
do you have one right there?
Yeah, hang on. Here.
What is it? Oh, you want to show it to me? I like this. He's grabbing something off right. It is literally right behind his camera. It is a Jurassic
Hang on,
Park.
let me put these back on.
So he's got a Jurassic Park. I'm guessing that is from Hasbro, I believe.
I think it's Mattel now.
Did Mattel do those ones?
Mattel's doing the Hammond collection.
They did. Okay.
So they've got the license.
I ended up buying the Attack, the T-Rex Attack at
Sure.
Comic-Con for somebody.
Yeah, these are the crazy collector ones. They're a little pricier. But
No, it looks gorgeous. Yeah.
And then I had to go online and get the secondary market articulated toes.
Because of course you need those.
Of course, you need all that. So
yeah. So yeah,
nerd stuff. I mean, that was almost my career. I wanted to be a paleontologist too as a kid. So it was either dinosaurs or puppets. So
now
one required more math.
You've since done dinosaur puppets, so that works well for you. Shout out to Normal Man Andrew McGuire. Shout out to Dan Aykroyd. Shout out to Norm
72 today.
What's that?
72
Oh, Dan
today.
Aykroyd is 72.
Oh, is that who that was?
This is Dan Hackroyd.
Oh, Hackroyd. Oh,
the evil twin brother of Dan Aykroyd.
The evil twin. 72.
No, he's 27. Shout out to Norm from Cheers. We love Norm. Norm from Cheers. Shout out. I was actually just thinking about you because somebody was asking me about doing like traveling to different cities. And I said, I loved Kansas City and I've met some amazing people. Norm from Cheers, one of those people I was talking about.
Wow.
Yeah. Gift of the Magi. Shout out to Dan Adams, Ski World's humblest man. Shout out to Bart Fartigan. The To Be Terror says the strike may be over, but egg Bob Iger anyway, because him. Okay.
Why not?
Take that, Bob. Let's egg the Supreme Court now.
Yeah, exactly.
And, shout out to Mr. Billy Beck. If you want to be a part of this aspect of the conversation, all you got to do is head on over to patreon.com/JeffMay. Check this out. You sign up today upon release if you're on the Patreon, or if you're a week in and you're listening to free, we appreciate that a lot as well. You'll be on 2 more episodes just this month. Real money's worth on this one. So like, do it.
Excellent.
Yeah, and so check that out. Now, cutting back to this. So you've been working with a lot of stuff. You worked on the Muppets. You did Crank Yankers. You also worked on Last Week Tonight.
Yes.
Which I would love to know. You did some stuff with like Nutter Butter, which is like, that's their
yeah, well, that's Noel's big thing. Noel is Mr. Nutter Butter.
Okay.
But I got to be part of the Nutter Butter Quartet,
yeah.
Trio for a big musical number for the You Bob video.
Hell yeah.
Which is awesome. If you haven't seen it, you should go and look it up.
So funny.
It's amazing. So Bob Flanagan built that costume as well from SNL back in the day. He built almost all of the stuff that John Oliver's show used up until about 3 years ago. So, but I got to be on that, which was a crazy shoot. 3 of us, myself, David Fino, and Noel McNeil, who was Bear. He's John's main puppeteer. He always brings him up, and I luckily get to go in and assist on occasion. And the 3 of us in a park near the New York courthouse, downtown Lower Manhattan, at like 3 a.m, dressed as squirrels, doing a dance. And then we shot back uptown to Midtown, right in Times Square, for the big finale. Again, doing this craziness. Finished that job, took everything off, sent it away. I went home, finished packing, got in an airplane, and flew to Australia to do a cruise ship installation.
I mean, at least you got to sleep on the plane.
No, I didn't sleep. I can't sleep on planes.
I can't do that. I got to take edibles when I get on planes. Like,
yeah, it was just before, they weren't legal yet, so I didn't have any, but it was a whole thing. So
yeah,
but yeah, that was awesome. And that is a fun thing. But I was on the very first season of that show, and the first puppet thing they did a little musical bit about the prison system and incarceration in general. And the 3 characters, a little boy, a monster, and a little girl, talking to John on the stoop, a la Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Talking about that. And they sing a song about prisons. And that was my first live TV gig with a voice.
That's awesome. Were you nervous?
Incredibly. But it was me and Noel McNeil, who's amazing, and Stephanie DeBruza from Avenue Q and Sesame Street, this amazing Broadway level singer. And then here I am, like, singing this goofy little song with these people. So
I mean, that's
a little intimidating.
You actually dropped a hint for something that I might as well bring up now, which is you've done more than just film and animation, but you've also worked on Broadway on Avenue Q, but also Wicked.
Yeah. So Bob Flanagan did the Dragon Proscenium, which, if you go to the Broadway theater or any of the theaters showing a tour, there is a dragon puppet up above the proscenium of the theater, and he designed and built that. He also built the wizard head for that show and the cowardly lion in a cage. So I worked on the original Broadway run, helping fabricate that stuff.
Really?
Yeah. I've never seen it, but I worked on it.
Why haven't you seen it?
I just have no time to do these things.
Was it like they were like, thanks for working on this, you have to buy a ticket?
No, they don't do that. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The only show that I've worked on that I got to go like that was Avenue Q, and that was all Rick Lyon. Rick Lyon was involved in Avenue Q from the very beginning with Robert Lopez and, oh God, his name is falling out of my head, but the guy who wrote the book. They were in a musical theater workshop together in the city, and they all kind of developed that. And Rick was part of that development, designed the characters, and he is Mickey / Trekkie Monster on Broadway.
So Avenue Q is a very fascinating, it was like a real big surprise, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, what was it like working on that? Like, were you like, this is going to be huge, or was it going to be? Were you like, this is a
Yeah.
weird fucking thing we're
I,
working on?
it, it was a weird thing because I hadn't heard any of it yet. So I had no concept of it. I started helping Rick on it. I guess that was the summer I'd gotten laid off from Henson in 2002. There was, everybody got laid off. It was a whole thing. So I was working for Bob for a while, and on weekends I was helping Rick build these puppets for this Vineyard production, which is where it opened up in New York on the Vineyard Theater off Broadway. They went off, they delivered it, they opened it, and like 3 weeks later, it's like, well, this is going to Broadway. We have to start building it all again. So it
And it
was
only
like
took
that
three
quick of a
weeks because
turnaround.
yeah, I saw when I looked it up because like I obviously I wish I knew more about theater. I just
Yeah,
don't.
I
Um,
don't either. I mean, I do stuff for it, but I don't get it.
yeah, like I mean, I was actually I when I was in North Carolina, I saw the production for the Raleigh Center for the Performing Arts of Henry V that was really good,
Mhm.
and I thought to myself, I was like, I should have been more supportive of local theater
Yeah.
when I was back in New England.
Well, when
Uh,
it's good, it's amazing to see.
yeah,
It's just you get so often you see things that are not where you want it to be, I guess.
yeah. What was fascinating about Avenue Q, though, because I did look it up so I could get a little bit of interaction or
Sure.
understanding of it. And it's like productions, 2003, off Broadway, 2003, Broadway,
Yeah.
which
It
that
was
seems
that
almost
fast.
unheard of. Yeah.
It was very, very crazy quick turnaround. And no one really expected that. So Rick is in the show performing, and now he has to gear up his whole shop. He had to rent a place, hire all these puppet builders and costumers to come out to New Jersey, which thankfully I'm local. He's not far from me. And we started building the Broadway version of that show. And then as soon as we finished the Broadway one, it was Vegas and London.
Vegas in
So,
2005, then the West End in 2006, then
mhm,
back to off Broadway in 2009, and then
yeah,
like a ton of touring stuff. And
yeah,
also Tony Award winner for Best Musical,
I believe so.
Best
Yeah,
Book, and Best Original Score.
yeah. And it was
And you're
amazing.
just throwing this together, being like, I hope this works out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's
Thankfully
like
this is paying me.
they had faith, but I mean, it's like, John Tartaglia as the lead. He's a good friend of mine. He's the producer for Fraggle, and he's
Oh, great.
Gobo now. Stephanie DeBruzzo again, Rick Lyon. God, I start saying names and then people's names fall out of my head. But all of these amazing talents on that show, and they were there for years. I mean, it ran for so long.
When I want to go back now to
Mhm.
other stuff, like previous stuff, like you talked about like growing up and enjoying, the stuff that you enjoy. Like I used to rent The Dark Crystal came out. I was
Sure.
one when it came out. And
Hmm.
also I didn't realize it bombed in the theater, but it became this
Yeah.
like massive cult. But it makes sense because I rented that movie when I was a kid, probably 20 times.
I went to the library to rent that, not knowing, but that was the day that Jim died.
Oh,
I was in high school. It was my freshman year, and I'm walking home from school. I'm like, I'm gonna go rent this at the library. I feel like watching it. And I went, and they didn't have it. It was taken out, and I got home, and I found out he had passed away.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
that
it's still one of my favorite movies. I love that film. It's beautiful.
Did you watch the Netflix series?
I did. It was very pretty and far too long.
It was long. It You
It
could tell
dragged
that they were trying to do puppet Game of Thrones a little bit
a
with
little bit.
like all that, but God, it was good.
It suffers from what a lot of Netflix programs suffer from. It's too much padding because
And
they want to
editing
hit
me
this.
out.
They and editing you out of the game show. I know. I heard about that. How dare they? As long as you got paid.
Dude, I can't believe I'm like, you guys are gonna cut me out of this and you're still gonna give me okay.
As long as that happens, like,
As long as
well,
the
it's like
paycheck
I got
comes in
I that Monkey Boys brought me up to the season finale of SNL a couple years ago. We had built these three alien puppets for Kate McKinnon's final show,
for that
and
for
these
the
three aliens were going to pop out, and then they built the set, and only two puppeteers were going to fit. So Mike and Mark from Monkey Boys got to do it. Chris, the stage manager's like, "That's okay, just stand here. We're going to get you a paycheck." Fine, yeah,
that works for me, yeah.
it works for
And
me.
that was like the Kate and Gyllenhaal and Cecily Strong, right? That
Yeah,
classic, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's a great sketch.
It was a good episode.
You post about SNL
Mhm.
often. Like, how often are you making stuff for them? Like, it
Uh,
definitely seems like during this, while the season's going, and you're like, another one for SNL I banged out. Like
Yeah,
really
it all
impressive.
depends. It depends. I mean, that's Monkey Boys is the people who run that build. That's their contract, and I
Mhm.
work for them. They'll bring me in kind of as a pinch hitter if there's a heavy puppet aspect, or if I'm in the shop working on something else and something crazy comes in, I'll jump over and help on that. This last season, their in-house team actually didn't need much help. The only thing I really worked on in the 2023 season was making some snowmen for a bit with Kate McKinnon, where she was going to decapitate them with a chainsaw. So we had to make all these giant, like, 5.5 foot tall snowmen out of polystyrene bead foam. So I'm covered in white powder all night and made like 4 or 5 separate heads for each one for rehearsal. And then,
Yeah.
which was great. The only problem I had with it is the gag, like, the gag was she was supposed to cut into it and it was going to spurt blood and it was going to be really crazy and raucous. And in the actual show, it's just kind of like meh. It didn't really
Right.
go for the sell the action.
Oh, so Monkey Boys, as I'm looking into them, they've
They're
worked on a
amazing.
lot of stuff,
Yeah, you
including
you've seen
Mystery
they did the
Science
Pateki
Theater 3,
Teki Mystery Science
Mystery
Theater.
Science Theater, the Dr.
Yeah.
Seuss Experience,
Mhm.
obviously Last Week Tonight and Saturday Night Live, The Tonight Show. Wow.
Mhm. Yep. They do the Little Shop off Broadway right now. That is their plant. They built that.
Damn. They
Yeah.
built their Audrey 2,
Hmm.
Funny Girl, Grubhub boxes.
Yeah, that was a thing they had to do. I don't really know what that gig was, but it was. I think they made about 40 or 50 of these 3D printed boxes for Grubhub promotion.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. No, they're
Um,
amazing. They're an amazing company.
they are, and I'm assuming they're good to work with if
Yeah.
you're with them. The last thing I want to talk to you on the main show is actually something that we've touched upon for like half a second, but which is that you actually work a lot with the Bronx Zoo. Like you do a lot
Yes.
of their holiday stuff. Like, and when I say holiday, I mean different holidays, not just
Hmm.
Christmas or whatever.
Yeah.
You work with them. You said you were working on, you did like they're doing 125th celebration that you're working on. So
Hmm.
like, are you just building puppet animals? Like, what do you do with
Uh,
them?
well, kind of. I mean, it
Not just, but
not
like,
just. Well, the relationship there started. Initially, Noel was doing for their Boo at the Zoo. He had written some shows for the Bronx Zoo, and they 20-minute, 25-minute shows with original songs and scripts, and I would build puppets for that. First with a company called the Puppet Kitchen, and then I just kind of took over and did it on my own. And we did that for several years, and they stopped doing that. And then when the year before the pandemic, they came to me and asked me about building some dinosaurs. So I built these dinosaur skeleton puppets. It's a T-Rex and a Triceratops, and that was for a parade that they would do. And
how
came out
big were the
beautifully.
puppets?
Decent sized. I'll send you a picture. They were big. The T-Rex was about 12, 13 feet long
Oh
and
wow. So
was
this
up on a
is
backpack up above me. And you drove the head kind of like this, so you get
okay.
the head to look around and up and down. So I did that, and that was the year before the pandemic. Made that for them, and it went really well. And then they came to me the next year, and they're like, "Oh, we want to do this Boo at the Zoo thing. It's a parade." And I made a turkey vulture and an owl, and what else was there? There was something else. Anyway, we built these 3 costumes, and we just kind of parade around with the stilt walkers that they hire into the parade, and that went really well. And then the pandemic hit, and they were like, well, we're still going to do stuff, but it's outdoors. We have this thing for holiday lights, which I didn't know existed. And it's like they light up these giant Chinese lanterns and animal lanterns all over the place down the trails at night because New York in the winter, not a great time to go to the zoo during the day.
And certainly
Most of
not,
the
a place you don't want well lit at night
exactly, yeah, yeah. So it was an
because of the
interesting thing.
weather
So like the
up in
weather
Merton.
and the Bronx. Yeah, so we did this thing for holiday lights, which was okay, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do. I was trying to pitch them on these illuminated puppets that would walk around because I had seen somebody doing something similar, actually down in the Carolinas. I forget where, but this woman does parade puppets, and they were beautiful.
Cool.
So I showed it to them next summer. I was like, well, this is what I really wanted to do. And they kind of dropped their jaws. I said, yes, do it. And just let me go.
They're like, yes, we
So
want
I
that very much. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I built these 12-foot tall, kind of gawky crane birds. They're all white fabric with a framework on the inside, but they're filled with LED lights. And we flip them on and we walk through around at night, and it's just a magical thing to see. So
Ah, man, I want to see that.
yeah, I'll send you videos. They're really really cool. And now then it's like we've just become developed a really close like shorthand with the team that does all of these events. And I just kind of like, hey, do you have any ideas for this? And I'll say, oh yeah, we could make this thing, or we could make this thing. And they just say, yeah, go for it, make it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
You
it's the
also
best kind of client.
is that how you made a shark for
That's
the
why I made a shark.
aquarium?
Yep, it's for the aquarium. Yep.
So like they're just like, well, if he works with the zoo, he might as well work for the aquarium.
Yeah, well, it's all part of. They're all under the same group because
Oh,
it's all part of that same heading.
you're
So
like, here's a
they
bee.
run the event. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I made some fish, and so we've got the sharks and the fish at the aquarium, and the birds up there. And I this last year, I made kind of a take on a nyala, which is a kind of antelope, and it's a two-man puppet, and walks with four legs and a big long head, and it's really beautiful at night.
Man,
So,
that is
so
so
they're a
cool.
fun client. I mean, it's not a big media client, but it's interactive, and you're getting that in-person reaction from people. You know,
Yeah, it's not like here's the thing that like I wish more people got because like everybody really does get obsessed with media
yeah,
and like movies and film, right? Like,
yeah,
and I love having actors or people that work in there on my show, of course. And I
sure,
love asking those questions because I think that it's also a very popular subject. What's this like?
yeah,
What's it like doing stuff for SNL and stuff like that? But like, I don't think that's what makes people fascinating. To be
yeah.
100% honest,
No,
like
I
I'm
I
more interested
I
in like
get that.
origins and
Yeah.
stuff. So like
Well, and I
you
wasn't
working with
directing
the
that at
zoo,
you,
like
but
what
it's more of a thing. Just
yeah, like
it's
this and you being able to sort of let loose with what you do and all that,
sure,
I find much more
and,
fascinating
and it's so much
than
more
just
fun.
like I made 18 heads of the bear, which is still
Yeah,
great. It's still like a wonderful
exactly.
thing, but it's also like, yeah, but like this thing now where you're being given this creative license to
Yeah,
play and to
and
bring
it's fun.
ideas to a world famous institution, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, that
Like,
is. It's a beautiful place. Growing up here, having gone there from the time I was 4, on to be a part of that history now, working there is really fun. So
final question
go
for
for it.
the regular episode. When you look at your life and career now,
Mhm.
how do you view it?
I think I've been very fortunate. I've been very
I
lucky.
mean, like positives, and if there are negatives too, I'm
I mean,
interested
there's
to know as
always
well.
negatives.
Yeah.
Life is full of negatives. You can't. But
Yeah.
overall, I mean, I got where I wanted to be, and I think I got there very young. I was 23 when I started working with the Henson Company, so I was very, very lucky, and I learned a lot. I think the hardest part of that was when that job went away in 2002 because of corporate changes and sales, and that's you don't think of that as I thought I would be there forever. And then I jumped around and freelanced for a while, but then I had a very long period of like, what am I going to do? You know,
Yeah.
I was doing catering and deliveries
Or
and
your Uber driver right here. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I went from the height of my profession to down to that and then had to build back up. And it took a long time. So there is no clear direct path. I did, and this isn't, there are very few multi-million air puppet builders. There are some very lucrative performers. The building end is a more difficult road to hoe. It's harder to get those jobs, and I was dealing with it the last 2 weeks. I was in discussions for a costume for a commercial. You give them a budget. Okay, everything's great. And then they come back. Oh, they slashed the budget. They don't want you to come to set. They don't want you to do this. They don't want to pay for the flight. Now your budget's getting cut, cut, cut.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, can you prove that you can do this? And you forget, oh, I'm dealing with a company that's being run by 25-year-olds who don't know what I do. They've
Yeah.
never experienced this world.
You're
So
like,
you have to constantly
here's
prove yourself.
my Muppetepedia page or
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. But they don't understand that. It means nothing to them. So
God, it's got to be frustrating.
yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's all part of it. Have you, I have one more question. Have
No,
you
cool.
thought about sort of like studying voice acting in order to maybe like boost
Yeah.
that sort of like possibility of you're like, I can both make my own Muppet or
And
puppet
be my own thing.
and be that character?
Yeah.
Um,
That is something I probably should do. I'm not as adept a performer as some. I mean,
why we
honestly,
take classes, yeah.
yeah. I mean, but it's also then there's the time to do that because it's
That's the
the
hard part.
physicality of building a thing. Like I'm here in the basement finishing a job for a cruise ship on. I leave for Puerto Rico on Saturday,
Oh, that's
so
so
I've
cool.
got. Here, I'll give you the. You can see
Yeah.
this.
So
The
he's
guest
picking up
lamp, but
the,
I've got.
so we're looking at some
So
pretty cool looking. Oh my God,
yeah.
those look so cool.
Thank you. So
Uh,
these guys are all UV because the show is blacklight. So this is 3 out
I'm
of the
not going to
cast.
say what they are. I just think they look
Oh,
really
well,
cool.
thank you.
And when they're under a UV light or, black
Yeah.
light or whatever, going to look really cool.
Let me
I'm
pop a
looking at
little
him
more.
holding one of these puppets under this light, and it looks very, very cool and
Thank you.
vibrant. And
Yeah.
I like the eye choice.
Well, that's going to change. I have to paint them, but
Oh, well,
those are
fuck
just
me
I had to
then.
show the boss. No, you're good. I had to show my boss. Hey, look, they're almost done. Like so, like I'll be here all week banging these out, and like this is one of them too.
How long does it take to make one of those guys? About,
About day and a half, 2 days each,
okay.
depending. It's blacklight and they're very simplified palettes. So a lot of it's machine stitching. I don't have to do a lot of hand work. So that changes your time frame a little bit.
That is really cool. For those of you that wants to know more, a good way to learn more about James's career is actually to follow him on Instagram at
Yeah,
Puppet Dungeon, which I'm
that's me.
assuming is where you're recording right now,
I am in the puppet dungeon,
in the
or
Puppet
also
Dungeon.
known as my mother's house's basement. But yes,
You have a fascinating Instagram presence because it's like it'll be like nothing, nothing, and then there's nothing because you're working on something. That's something I've
yeah,
actually learned about is like
uh-huh.
you'll be quiet, and then all of a sudden you just start like
Yeah,
blasting stuff out. I'd be like, and
yeah.
here's this thing that I worked on. Glad to see
Or
my
it's my
work on
flower
Saturday
garden in the
Night
front
Live.
yard, or it's my flower garden in the front yard.
You do have a lot of videos of the flower garden, which
Yeah,
I
it's been
actually
I've been dealing
videos of
with
flowers. Yeah,
I
it's
was
like
struggling with Instagram's AI nonsense, and I'm like, do I want to keep posting in this world? But I kind of have to because it's the
it's very cruel. Yeah,
ecosystem,
it's
you
sort of like
know.
having to vote in this election. You're like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
cruel that
horrifying.
you're making me do this.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's really not a good answer, but I have to answer it.
so everyone go and follow at Puppet Dungeon. James, is there any other stuff that
Uh,
we can do to sort of
to
get information about you and also support you?
that's kind of the main spot right now.
Yeah.
I do need to create a website eventually. I've been asked that numerous times. I'm like, I don't have one. I dropped Twitter forever ago, and I realized I don't think in the 5 or 6 lines to put on a thread or on a blue sky. I appear there, but I only read stuff.
Yeah, I have a Blue Sky account. I ain't doing shit with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
just they just I Instagram works. It's photos. I'm a visual medium. It's better to look at.
It's so funny because I'm so much better at Twitter
Yeah.
that my always my best performing Instagram posts are just screenshots of my tweets.
You do have good ones though. You've had some of my favorites.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I actually my lady friend this weekend, she like kind of like doesn't go on Twitter and I was
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, well, I'll follow, I'll retweet some of your stuff. You're actually really funny. You should be more." And she was like, "Ooh, somebody's a Twitter guy." And I was just like, "Yeah, well, I don't look like you. People
Yeah.
don't react to me the way they react to you on Instagram. Photos of me make people angry. Photos of you make people happy."
You look like a normal guy to me.
Yeah, well, it's because you're from the East
Yeah,
Coast, and so like
that's true.
most people look like pricks to you.
Well, that's I have my moments. I
Yeah,
try to. I don't think I've swore that much on this episode. I'm much more normally much
I'll bring it
more.
in, baby.
There you go.
I'll bring it in.
We'll give it into the Patreon kids in the next round.
Yeah, the Patreon
Yeah,
kids they get a swear cut on the
there you
Patreon,
go. That's right.
which is
Yeah.
really great. For those of you that are listening on the free feed, when the free feed episode gets released, all the cursing that we pull from the episode gets put into one 1 to 4 minute string of cursing.
They're phenomenal.
It is great. And that's a big shout out to my editor for like saying like I could do that.
There you go.
And he's like, I
Awesome.
would do that and it would not cost much more. So I was like,
Excellent.
we absolutely should do that. James Wojtal Jr. Did I say that right? Is it Wojtal?
Yeah, Wojtal, yeah.
Wojtal.
I'll answer to anything. I've had it butchered so many times in so many
Yeah,
ways.
but it's not hard for me to learn how to say
No,
it.
no, you're saying it fine. Wojtal or Wojtal works for me.
James Wojtal Jr. Guys, folks, if you are in New York, definitely check out the Bronx Zoo for all the really great puppetry that they work on. Some of it's really, really fantastic. And of course, follow at Puppet Dungeon. If you are a freeloader and you want to get early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content, head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May. I appreciate that you're listening to the show. It means a lot to me that you're here. It would mean a little bit more to me if you gave me a couple of bucks for it, but that's fine. It's fine. But definitely head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May. We can do lots of stuff. We do producers, we do trading cards in the mail. There are lots of options for you to get a maximum, I think, benefit. I think I'm a pretty good deal in the Patreon world. So
good bang for your buck, folks.
I think so. I think the card packages alone cover everything. I think I'm usually sending out more than
Hell yeah.
The value is probably more than what I'm making off of them, but also I really like doing that. So it's fine. For those of you that are on the Patreon, stick around because we've got some Patreon exclusive content coming your way. But if you want to hear more from me and you're just listening to this, if you're a friend of James and you're like, I like this guy, I want to listen to more stuff, you can check out Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on the Gamefully Unemployed Network and Patreon. And of course, all the stuff I do with Adam Todd Brown on You Don't Even Like This Network. You don't even like podcast networks, like you don't even like sports, and you don't even like this show. And of course, if you want to see me live, I do a comedy show every second Friday of the month at Blast from the Past on beautiful Magnolia in Burbank, California, which means our next one is going to be July 12th. Freeloaders, I miss you and I love you. See you next time. Come over to the Patreon and come see all the cool stuff we got going on. James, say goodbye to the freeloaders.
Bye, freeloaders.
Hey, bye, everybody. Patrons, stick around. We got you. Bye. Hey everyone, our artwork is created by Justin T. Brown, who can be found at Artness by Justin Brown on Instagram, as well as artnessbyjustinbrown.com. That dope music you heard is by Troy Nababon, available at Troy Nababon on Instagram, as well as at troynababon.com. Nababon is spelled Nababon.